can't do it. Hey friends, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Sydney, and today's video we will be chatting about all the books that I read in February. Hey, what's up? How are you? I hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for being here and hanging out with me for a little bit. Okay, I know I said it already in my spin the bottle video for March, but truly I cannot believe how long February felt. Like, it's still the 28th, right? It's the 28th of February right now when I'm filming this, and it feels like February has happened twice. But if I am counting my reads correctly, I read 9.5 sort of books in the month of February, so let's get on into them. The first one was a carryover from January. It was my January book club pick, and it is The Book Eaters. This one had a lot of mixed reviews in the book club. It definitely is not a book for everyone. In the story, we have kind of like a dual timeline perspective going on, and in both of them we're following Devon, and in one timeline in particular we're following her and her son Kai, and the other timeline is following Devon as she grows up and what all kind of occurs to bring her to where she is now in present day. And the idea around the story is that they're not human, they eat books as sustenance, and there's a lot of like rules and stipulations that go on with this practice. Like, if they eat too many books in their lifetime, their mind like retains all of that, and like it's almost like filling up a hard drive. Like, they start to get slower and slower. So the rule of thumb is to read as many as the same stories as possible, and there's like a lot of little rules like that that I just thought were really interesting. But those people are called book eaters, and there is another subgroup of people within this like community called mind eaters, and you can kind of guess from the name, but they have a taste for the human mind and not actual books. So basically like vampiric cannibalism in a way. And our main character, Devon's son, Kai, is a mind eater, and they are, in the present day timeline, on the run basically because mind eaters are typically like enslaved as dragons, they call them, and used by, I think they're called the knights, which are the people that organize the marriages to try to minimize interfamilial breeding. So the knights use dragons to keep people in line. Dragons are the mind eaters, you know what I'm saying? And so we're learning about them, we're learning about the families, we're learning about book eaters in general, and we're following this like pretty interesting timeline where Devon and her son are on the run, Devon having to find her son food, which are literal humans. There are some pretty exciting scenes, but it is definitely like a slow burn type of book. I personally really liked the dual timeline. I really enjoyed how our main character Devon was written, and it didn't shy away from like the dark and gritty and gruesome aspects that come with having a son that is a mind eater. And it just, it brings in some like really like strange like culty religious aspects towards the end. Like, I had a really good time, but I know that this book is not for everyone, but I had a great time. I thought it was really fun, really interesting. I loved the writing, I loved the audiobook, and all the characters that we came into contact with all played some sort of role. Like, everything felt purposeful. It's all very like intricate and interesting for such a short book, and I gave it a 4 out of 5. The next book that I read in the month of February is House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson. This is following our main character Marion, who applies to be a blood mage, not a blood mage, blood maid, applies to be a blood maid for the House of Hunger, which is like an elite house of the north. And it's basically another play on like a vampire story, sort of. The people who drink blood in these situations are very ill, and they have to consume blood in order to like keep their health up, I guess. And Marion lives in like the slums. She applies, she gets in because she has a very unique taste of blood. She gets this like one-way ticket for this dream opportunity, because if she puts in her years at the House of Hunger, she will retire with a really substantial like nest's egg. Is that what people say? Egg nest? Dowry? She'll retire comfortably. But when she gets there, she figures out that there is a lot of sinister things going on within the House of Hunger, and we're following the story of her figuring these things out while trying to please her new mistress Elizabeth and trying to survive these like really strange elaborate parties with really uncomfortable games. Like, I don't know. It was fine. I really didn't love it a lot, and I'm really bummed about it because Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson was one of my favorite books of, what was it, 2020 maybe? Whenever it came out, maybe 2021. And this was one of my most anticipated releases of the year. So I am definitely upset that it didn't hit me the way that Year of the Witching did and the way that I was hoping it would. Honestly, it was just a little bit too slow. Not a whole lot of things were happening. And when they were, I don't know, it just wasn't exciting. The atmosphere was done pretty well. And I will say, if you have like any sort of aversion to blood or any sort of anything with blood, do not read this, because the descriptions of blood in this book and like the ingestion of it made my stomach turn a couple times, to be completely honest. And I'm an ICU nurse. It was just, the descriptions were way too descriptive for me. It was just a lot. Alexis Henderson definitely wrote like mania really well. The sort of idea that you become so enraptured with someone that you will literally do anything to make them love you back. Those types of situations were written really well, but the storyline and the plot, they were just lacking for me. I just was really excited when I finished the book. So I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5. The next book I read was Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. For this book, I actually have a exclusive reading vlog for it on my Patreon since it was last month's buddy read pick, and that's what I usually do. Every month in our book club, we have a main pick, which will have a live show discussion, and then a buddy read pick, which I will do an exclusive reading vlog for, and then we can have some discussions while of course having Discord threads for each of them. But some brief thoughts of this one. This book won Best Sci-Fi of 2022 on Goodreads, and I didn't read too many of the other finalists in that genre last year, but I am inclined to say that I'm not mad that this one won because it truly was something special. In this story, it is like a plague pandemic-esque style book starting on an island in Vancouver in 1912, spanning all the way to like a dark colony on the moon hundreds of years later. This book does a lot of things really well. The writing was one of my favorites. I don't even know if I know how to like describe it. Kind of like soft and emotional, but like intellectual and deep at the same time. The way that it brings humanity into the story is really insanely special. I could cry thinking about one page in particular because it brings up a situation that I felt so deeply during the many heights of the pandemic working in the ICUs. I quite literally sobbed at this book because I hadn't like been in that mental place for a while, and I can't like say too much without spoiling anything, so just know that if you have any sort of like connection to the pandemic or pandemic stories, this book does touch on those things in really beautiful ways, really tough ways, but like they made it beautiful and emotional. The sci-fi aspects of the story is where the intrigue comes in because they're all trying to find out this anomaly that occurs on this island in Vancouver in 1912, and it keeps coming up throughout these hundreds of years, and all of these different people are trying to figure out what was going on because they start to realize that it links that situation with another one that happened hundreds of years later, and there's just this like timeline and time travel-esque sort of vibe happening, and it was really interesting. I read this in one sitting and it was a really great time. One of the reveals at the end like for sure went over my head. I was like, oh, am I supposed to care so much about this person or like this situation? But all in all, I ended up giving this a 4.5 out of 5. It reminded me a lot of How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu, so if you liked that book, you would definitely be into this book, so I would recommend this to you. It's hard for me to say which one of the two I like more. I'm more inclined to say that I liked How High We Go in the Dark over Sea of Tranquility, but they both hold a really special place in my heart because this book, again, literally made me sob. Okay, the next book that I read in the month of February was for my romance reading vlog. I picked up The Fine Print by Lauren Asher. This is book 1 in the Dreamland Billionaires series, and man, I loved this. I'm currently reading Terms and Conditions, so that should tell you how excited I am about it. But in this series, I'm pretty sure it's like almost directly loosely related to Disney World, but we have this place called Dreamland, right? And we have 3 brothers whose grandfather who owned Dreamland has passed away and left each brother a letter containing their kind of instructions of what they have to do, like a task basically that each of them have to complete in order for them to get their inheritance and share of the company. Now, each of them have to complete their task or none of them will get their inheritance or share. So each book, it's a trilogy, follows each of the brothers. This one follows Rowan and then our love interest Zara, and it's just, I love that idea of a trilogy. I think it's really fun. I think it's really interesting. All 3 of these boys so far that I'm gathering have major daddy issues, so they're all very like damaged, and I love a damaged boy. Grumpy Sunshine all the way, and that is exactly who Rowan is in this story, but he definitely has his soft sides, and it's his task in particular is to lead a production project that will renovate Dreamland and bring like, you know, even more people to come visit because of this like new project, so to say. And then our love interest Zara is also someone who has her demons, but she is like positive and open, and I really loved how both of these characters were written. I felt like it was really realistic. Like I could see this happening, and I'm obviously intrigued enough to continue the series. I gave this like a 4.5 out of 5 as well. Like, I mean, I probably would rate it a 5 on Goodreads. I don't know what I actually did rate it on Goodreads, but I still haven't stopped thinking about it, so I feel like it should be a 5. Next in that romance reading vlog was Dirty Letters by V. Keyla Island and Penelope Ward. In the story, we follow our main characters, Griffin and I can't remember her name. But when they were kids, they were set up as pen pals through school, and they just continued to be pen pals. They continued to write to each other until a certain thing happened in our female main character's life. Again, I can't remember her name, I'm so sorry. To where she just stopped responding because she was, you know, going through it. Now in their adult life, they end up reconnecting via pen paling, and Griffin has moved from the UK to the US, and it's following that situation where now they're older, so now they might actually have the means to, you know, connect. And I don't know about you, but I absolutely adore letters in a book. Like when we can physically read letters that someone is writing to another person, I eat it up. Makes the story go by so quick. I feel like I'm reading like gossip articles, you know? So the first like 40% or so of the book, I was like, oh my God, is this gonna be a 5 stars? Like I'm loving this. But then what really kind of sucked for me was when they actually transitioned from pen paling to meeting each other in person. I just like, where's the chemistry? I couldn't find it. It was nowhere to be found. And it was just weird and awkward. And I could tell that the writers were like hitting their strides sometimes because I would go like 50 pages without even realizing that I just read 50 pages. But then other times I'm like, okay, this has to be done soon. You know what I'm saying? So I think that there were some plot issues and pacing issues and overall just like chemistry issues. Like I just didn't see it completely. I did have a good time with it, but with those things in mind, I did give it a 3 out of 5. Then the next book that I read, which is being borrowed by a friend actually, Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute by Talia Hibbert. This was so great. This is an adorable YA romance following Bradley and Celine, who were friends turned enemies, turned friends to enemies to lovers, basically. Like there's so much going on and it's a great YA romance. In the story, Celine is signing up to do a survival course in the woods in order to try to impress one of her dream icons who organizes this situation to award scholarships to the people who get the highest scores on this survival course. And Bradley joins her on this quest, and Celine is not about it because now they have to work together in these new high stress situations. So it's like forced proximity, and they're forced to not only like deal with mud physically, but like also the mud of their past. You know what I'm saying? And I thought it was great. Like obviously there's some miscommunication because they're young, they don't really know how to communicate their feelings entirely, but 100% when our main characters were on the same page and like trying to figure things out, the way that they were conversing with each other was giving adult romance, truly. Like I really thought that this was a really solid book. I rated it a 4 on Goodreads, but definitely feel like it is a 4.5. Then we could just stay on the romance train because Caleb and I both read Planet Barbarians by Ruby Dixon this, I almost said year, I mean technically yeah, but this past month in February. We did an unhinged review of it and it is a wild ride. I'll link it down below, it was a lot of fun. Since we have like a pretty long discussion about it, I'm not going to get into it here, but I was pleasantly surprised by Planet Barbarians. I was torn between a 3 and a 4 for it, but enjoyment wise, it's like maybe leaning towards a 4, but there are some things that Caleb and I both can't get over. So I think that I would give it like a 3 to a 3.5. It really did surprise me with how much of a good time I had with it. The next book I read, oh my goodness, I'm so excited that I mood read it this past month, is Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. Man, I loved it. This is his like secret project 1 of 2023 that he did the Kickstarter for. I almost didn't get the physical copies, but I'm so glad I did because this is like the most pleasant feeling hardback I think I've ever had. It's like a really soft leather and it is absolutely stunning. The title pages, let's see. Well, one, there's a bunch of beautiful illustrations, like hello, and like the title pages are just absolutely stunning. The chapter heads have little accents of different colors. It's just a grand old time. I loved this book. In the story, our main character is Tress, and she lives in the Emerald Sea on this rock. I mean, it's like their island is like made of rock, you know what I'm saying? She falls in love with the Duke's son, but his father obviously does not approve of any sort of relationship with a peasant girl. So he takes his son out into the Spore Sea, which the sea isn't water, it's made of spores that are deadly to humans or anything wet. It makes them like explode or do all these different things depending on what type of spore it is. It's a whole thing. It's a whole world building thing that's really fun and interesting and dangerous. But he goes off to sea in search of a wife for his son, you know? But he ends up getting lost at sea because he wouldn't marry anyone else because he's in love with Tress. So Tress becomes a pirate basically and goes off searching for the love of her life. And the cast of characters that we follow are phenomenal. It's almost like a found family situation, but like they're pirates, so no one really really trusts each other immediately. It takes a lot of time. There's a talking animal, there's danger, there's intrigue. The world building is phenomenal. It's beautiful. It's a classic Brandon Sanderson. I had a great time. It's also absolutely hilarious. Wow. Yeah, I have to say that. Like, I laughed out loud multiple times while reading this book. It's funny. I've been torn between a 4 and a 5, but I think I'm leaning more towards a 5, so maybe like a 4.5. Sounds good. My camera's gonna die. I'm gonna try to be quick. Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett is the last book that I read last month. This is actually my book club pick for February, so I don't want to talk about it too much in this wrap up since our live show is March 10th in my book club for it. So I did read it, but I'm withholding information for now. But I think that that's it. I feel like since February was so long, I feel like I'm missing books, but that has to be it. Wait, I did forget about one. So I did try to read A Fire Endless by Rebecca Ross, and I ended up soft DNFing it because, hear me out, my camera died, but hear me out, okay? I read A River Enchanted, and it was giving these really cool, like, magical island, small town vibes, but then I also read Spells for Forgetting in the same year, and Spells for Forgetting also has this magical island, small town vibe, and I know that they're not the same story, but in my opinion, truly, Spells for Forgetting does it so much better. It is so much more exciting. There's like a whole more interesting plot and mystery going on, and if you remember, Spells for Forgetting was actually in my best books of 2022 video. It completely took me by surprise. So the fact that I read 2 books with similar vibes or similar ideas, and one was clearly my favorite, it definitely made A River Enchanted go down on my list. And that being said, when I tried to pick up A Fire Endless, I just truly could not get back into the story. I found my mind wandering and having to reread paragraph after paragraph because it just couldn't hold my attention. I even had the audiobook with it, and I couldn't do it. However, I don't think that it is a hard DNF because it is a story that I could see myself being like in the mood for and then picking it up, you know? So it is a soft DNF, but for right now, I can't foresee myself trying to pick it up again anytime soon, which is fine, but it was a bummer. I mean, I hate to say that I kind of saw it coming though, since I know how I feel about Spells for Forgetting. So it just didn't hold up. It just didn't hold up, and I was bummed about it, but I definitely did try to read A Fire Endless this past month, but it didn't go well. Okay, now go back. I think that that's it. So let me know down below what your best book was of last month, or leave the rock emoji if you are still watching. And while you're down there, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. I always appreciate your support. And of course, be kind to one another and happy reading. Bye.